When Michael Chambers told James Brown he was a better dancer, everyone in the room went silent. Brown looked at him, smiled, and said, "Prove it." What happened in the next 10 minutes destroyed one man's career, but created a legend. It was March 12, 1965, at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York. James Brown was preparing for his second show of the night, and the energy backstage was electric. His band was warming up, his backup singers were practicing their harmonies, and Brown himself was in his dressing room, going through his pre-show ritual that had become sacred to him. That's when the door burst open without a knock, and a man nobody recognized walked in like he owned the place. Michael Chambers was 23 years old, classically trained in ballet and modern dance, and he'd just finished a successful 6-month run on Broadway. He was tall, lean, and moved with the kind of precision that only years of formal training could produce. He was also white, which in 1965 Harlem, walking into James Brown's dressing room uninvited, took either tremendous courage or tremendous stupidity. "You are James Brown," Chambers said. It wasn't a question. Brown looked up from his mirror, where he'd been perfecting his hair. He didn't say anything, just raised one eyebrow and waited. "I've seen your show 3 times now," Chambers continued, his voice carrying that particular confidence that comes from never having been truly challenged. "And I have to tell you something. Your singing? Incredible. Your stage presence? Unmatched. But your dancing?" He paused for dramatic effect. "I can outdance you, Brown?" The room went completely silent. Brown's road manager, Ben Bart, actually dropped the clipboard he was holding. The backup singers stopped mid-note. Even the band in the next room seemed to sense something had happened, because the music just died. Brown stood up slowly from his chair. He was shorter than Chambers by at least 3 inches, but somehow, when he rose to his full height, he seemed to fill the entire room. "Say that again," Brown said quietly. Chambers, either too brave or too foolish to recognize the danger he was in, smiled. "I said I can outdance you. I'm classically trained. I've studied under Martha Graham. I've performed at Lincoln Center. No disrespect, but what you do out there, that's not real dancing. That's just moving around." What happened next surprised everyone. Brown didn't get angry. He didn't throw Chambers out. Instead, he smiled. It was the kind of smile a lion gives right before it pounces. "Prove it," Brown said. Chambers blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Prove it. Right now. On my stage. In front of my audience." Brown looked at his watch. "Show starts in 20 minutes. You'll go on right before me. 10-minute dance battle. You do your thing, I do mine. Audience decides who's better." The blood drained from Chambers' face. I didn't bring any music. I don't have—" "You can use my band," Brown interrupted. "They'll play whatever you want. You said you're better than me, right? So prove it." Chambers had backed himself into a corner, and he knew it. Word would spread instantly if he backed down now. In the cutthroat world of professional dance, being called a coward would end his career faster than any failed performance. "Fine," Chambers said, trying to sound confident. "Let's do it." What neither man knew was that someone had already run to a phone and called every major music journalist in New York City. By the time the show started, the Apollo Theater was more packed than it had been in months. People were standing in the aisles, sitting on the stairs, pressing against the walls. Word had spread like wildfire through Harlem. James Brown was about to put a cocky white dancer in his place. When the MC announced that there would be a special dance competition before James Brown took the stage, the crowd erupted. This wasn't in the program. This was something spontaneous, and everyone in that theater knew they were about to witness something special. Michael Chambers walked onto the Apollo stage to polite but skeptical applause. He was wearing a simple black leotard and dance shoes, looking every inch the professional ballet dancer. He'd chosen a jazz standard for his music, something sophisticated and complex that would show off his technical training. For 7 minutes, Chambers gave the performance of his life. He executed perfect pirouettes, flawless grand jetés, and complex contemporary movements that demonstrated years of expensive training. His lines were clean, his extensions were beautiful, and his technical precision was undeniable. He was, objectively, an excellent dancer. The Apollo audience gave him respectful applause when he finished. It was the kind of applause you give to someone who's technically proficient but hasn't touched your soul. Chambers walked off stage breathing hard but smiling. He'd done well, and he knew it. Now he stood in the wings, waiting to see what James Brown would do. What James Brown did next became the stuff of legend. Brown walked onto the stage wearing a purple suit that seemed to shimmer under the lights. He didn't say a word to the audience. He just looked at his band, counted them in with a snap of his fingers, and the Apollo Theater exploded. The band hit the opening notes of I Got You, I Feel Good, and Brown's body became something that seemed to defy physics. He dropped into a split so fast that people in the front row gasped. He popped back up like gravity didn't apply to him. He spun, slid, glided and moved in ways that made it look like his bones had turned to liquid. But here's what Michael Chambers didn't understand about James Brown's dancing. It wasn't about technique. It was about soul. It was about feeling the music so deeply that your body had no choice but to respond. Every move Brown made was connected to the rhythm, to the bass line, to the emotion of the song. Brown spun on one leg, his cape flying out behind him. He hit the famous James Brown knee drop, bouncing to the beat in a way that should have been impossible. He did the mashed potato, the camel walk, moves that he'd invented himself that would go on to influence generations of dancers. The crowd wasn't just applauding, they were screaming, standing, losing their minds. This wasn't a dance performance. This was a religious experience. 4 minutes into his performance, Brown did something that made Michael Chambers' blood run cold. Brown looked directly into the wings where Chambers was standing, smiled that same lion smile, and then proceeded to perform every single move that Chambers had just done, but with soul added to the technique. The perfect pirouette? Brown did it, but added a shout and a spin that made it feel dangerous. The grand jeté? Brown executed it, but landed in a split and bounced back up. The contemporary movements? Brown took them and added rhythm, funk, and emotion that transformed them from dance moves into a conversation with the audience. When Brown finished, the Apollo Theater erupted in applause so loud that it could be heard 3 blocks away. People were crying, screaming, stomping their feet. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. Michael Chambers stood in the wings, watching, and realized that he'd just learned the hardest lesson of his life. Technical perfection meant nothing without soul. Years of expensive training couldn't compete with authentic passion. He hadn't just lost a dance battle, he'd been educated. When Brown finally came off stage, sweating and breathing hard, he walked right past Chambers without looking at him. Chambers expected mockery, expected to be humiliated, expected Brown to rub his victory in his face. Instead, Brown stopped, turned around and said 6 words that would change Michael Chambers' life forever. Meet me in my dressing room. 20 minutes later, after Brown had cooled down and changed his shirt, Chambers knocked hesitantly on the dressing room door. Come in, Brown's voice called. Chambers opened the door, ready to apologize, ready to admit defeat, ready to leave New York and never dance professionally again. Brown was sitting in his chair, looking at him in the mirror. Closed the door. Chambers did. You're technically better than 99% of dancers I've ever seen, Brown said. Your training is obvious, your discipline is clear, but you know what's missing? Chambers shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. You're dancing for yourself. You're showing off your training. You're proving that you learned your lessons well. Brown turned around to face him directly. But you're not dancing for the audience. You're not feeling the music. You're executing choreography, not expressing emotion. Chambers felt tears starting to form. This was worse than mockery. This was the truth. I didn't bring you in here to humiliate you, Brown continued. I brought you in here because I see potential in you. You've got the foundation. You just need to learn how to build something beautiful on top of it. Why would you help me? Chambers asked, his voice barely a whisper. I insulted you. I challenged you in front of your people. Brown smiled, but this time it was genuine, warm, because someone did the same thing for me once, when I was young and stupid, and thought I knew everything. Little Richard put me in my place, and then taught me how to be better. Now I'm doing the same for you. What happened next wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was simple and profound. Brown offered to give Chambers private lessons, not in technique. Chambers already had that, but in soul, in feeling, in connecting with an audience. For the next 6 months, whenever James Brown was in New York, Michael Chambers would show up to his dressing room, and Brown would teach him. Not dance moves, but philosophy. How to feel the rhythm in your bones, how to let the music move through you instead of performing at it, how to understand that the audience wasn't judging your technique, they were feeling your energy. Chambers' career didn't end that night at the Apollo. It transformed. He took everything he'd learned from classical training and infused it with everything he learned from James Brown. He went on to choreograph some of the most influential dance sequences in Broadway history, always crediting Brown as his most important teacher. Years later, in 1991, Chambers was invited to choreograph a tribute to James Brown for the Kennedy Center Honors. He created a piece that combined classical ballet technique with soul and funk, a perfect marriage of his two worlds. When Brown saw it, he stood up in his box seat and applauded until his hands hurt. After the show, Chambers found Brown backstage. Both men were older now, grayer, but the respect between them was palpable. "You remember that night at the Apollo?" Chambers asked. Brown smiled. "Every time I see you dance, I remember it." "You destroyed my career that night," Chambers said. Brown's smile faded. "I never meant to." "No," Chambers interrupted. "You destroyed my career as a technical dancer who didn't understand anything, and then you gave me a new career as an artist who understood everything." He extended his hand. "Thank you for embarrassing me. It was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." Brown shook his hand, then pulled him into a hug. "You were always an artist, Michael. You just needed someone to show you where to find your soul." The story of the dance battle at the Apollo became legendary in the dance world. But the real story, the one that mattered, was what happened after. It was about a young man who thought he knew everything, learning that he knew nothing. It was about a legend who could have humiliated someone instead, choosing to educate them. It was about pride transformed into humility, and humility transformed into artistry. Michael Chambers kept a photograph on his office wall until the day he died. It was from that night at the Apollo, showing him and James Brown on stage together. Under it, he'd written a quote that Brown had told him during one of their lessons. "Technique is what you do when you're thinking. Soul is what you do when you stop thinking and start feeling." The night James Brown accepted a dance challenge from a cocky Broadway dancer, everyone expected a destruction. What they got instead was a masterclass in grace, in teaching, and in understanding that the greatest victory isn't defeating your opponent, it's transforming them into something better than they were before. If this incredible story of humility, transformation, and the true meaning of artistry moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of mentorship and grace. Have you ever had a moment when someone's tough love changed your life? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about music's greatest legends.